What happened when your husband tried to control you? When the man who once promised to protect you started deciding who you could be? At first, it looks like love. He checks on you, makes sure you're safe, tells you he just worries because he cares. And you believe him because you want to. Because love is supposed to feel safe. But safety can be a cage if someone else holds the key. It started small for me. Little things. Text me when you get there. Don't stay out too long. It sounded sweet, protective even. Until one day, I realized every decision I made somehow needed his approval. He'd scroll through my messages just to be sure. He'd question what I wore, first jokingly, then seriously. He'd tell me my friends were bad influences, that they didn't understand our relationship the way he did. And I listened. Because that's what love does to you. It makes you quiet. It makes you think patience will fix everything. The night it changed, the air itself felt wrong. Dinner burned on the stove while he scrolled through my phone in silence. Every second stretched like wire ready to snap. When I asked what he was doing, he looked up with eyes I barely recognized and said, "Is greater than, you shouldn't keep secrets from me." I tried to laugh it off, but then he grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to remind me who had the power. That was the first time I felt fear in my own home. The first time I realized, love can sound like a threat if you listen closely enough. He said, "Is greater than, if you ever walk out that door, don't come back." I stared at him, and for a moment, I almost believed I couldn't. But something inside me, small, quiet, still mine, refused to die. Because the thing about control is, once someone teaches you how it feels to lose yours, you'll do anything to take it back. Before the shouting, before the bruised silence that settled between us like fog, there was love. Or at least what I thought love was supposed to feel like. He was charming when I met him. The kind of man who noticed the smallest things. How I tucked my hair behind my ear when I got nervous. How I always ordered coffee, 2 sugars and no cream. How I tried to laugh off pain when something bothered me. That attention felt intoxicating. When you've spent years being overlooked, someone seeing you that closely feels like oxygen. He opened doors, sent flowers, remembered dates. My friends used to tease me, calling him old-fashioned in the best way. And for a while, I believed I'd found something safe. The first red flag didn't even look red. It looked like protection. One night, I was meeting friends for dinner. He texted, "Don't stay out too late. It's not safe that side of town." I told him not to worry. But halfway through dinner he called, just to check if I was still okay. It felt sweet then. Now I know it was the first chain. Soon it was constant. "Where are you? Who are you with? Send me a picture so I know you're fine." He'd frame it as love, and I'd mistake control for care. When you love someone, you learn to rationalize the things that hurt. You tell yourself it's their way of loving. But love shouldn't shrink you, and day by day, I was becoming smaller. One morning I woke up late. He'd been waiting downstairs, scrolling through my phone. "Is greater than, why didn't you answer my text last night?" "I fell asleep," I said, still groggy. He laughed too loud, too sharp. "Funny, you never fall asleep before replying to your friends." That was the first time I felt the temperature drop between us. It was also the first time I lied. Because sometimes it's easier to lie than to explain why you need space. I told myself all couples fight, that he'd calm down, that he just loved too hard. But control doesn't calm down. It grows teeth. And I didn't know it then. But the man who once made me feel seen was about to make me disappear completely. It started with simple requests. Little sentences that sounded like care, but carried rules hidden underneath them. "Call me when you get there. Don't wear that dress. It's too tight. I don't like your best friend. She doesn't respect us." The way he said it made me feel guilty for wanting freedom. He never yelled, not at first. He just sighed, like disappointment was a language and I was failing to learn it. Soon, I stopped meeting friends after work, stopped answering texts that made him upset. Every decision began with the same question in my head. Will this make him angry? I thought that was love, thinking of someone before yourself. But it wasn't love. It was obedience dressed up as devotion. He started checking in during my lunch breaks, then during meetings, then in the middle of the night just to make sure I wasn't ignoring him. When I didn't answer, the messages turned sharp. "Is greater than, who are you with? Why didn't you pick up? You know what this does to me." Every time I tried to pull away, he found a new way to make me stay. Apologies, promises, theirs. He'd say, "Is greater than, I just want to protect what's mine." And every time he said mine, a small part of me disappeared. He started changing things in the house. He kept the spare keys, moved my laptop password for safety, and insisted he should handle the bills so I wouldn't have to worry. That's how control works. It doesn't break you all at once. It rearranges your world piece by piece, until one day, you look around and realize there's nothing left that belongs to you. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed one night, my phone locked away in his drawer. He was asleep beside me, and I just stared at the ceiling, counting the quiet seconds, wondering how a home could feel so much like a cage. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you didn't notice when love turned into control? Drop it in the comments if you've ever mistaken possessiveness for care. Your story might help someone recognize the signs before it's too late. But control never stays quiet for long. It needs fear to survive. And the night he finally lost his temper was the night I realized I was done being afraid. It happened on a Thursday. The kind of night that begins quietly and ends with a version of yourself you'll never forget. Dinner was cold. He'd been late again. When he finally came home, I could tell by the sound of the door that something was wrong. The slam was too sharp. The silence that followed, too deliberate. Is greater than, you didn't wait for me, he said. His voice was calm, but the calm was worse than shouting. Is greater than, I warmed it twice, I whispered. I didn't know when you'd be home. He stared at me like I'd broken a rule neither of us had written down. Then he smiled. That quiet, cold smile that never reached his eyes. Is greater than, you never know anything anymore, do you? He sat down, picked up his plate, and started eating without a word. Every bite sounded like judgment. Every silence was a threat. When his phone buzzed on the table, I glanced at it by reflex. That was all it took. The look in his eyes froze my breath. Is greater than, who told you you could touch my phone? I didn't, I said quickly. The chair scraped against the floor as he stood. His voice was low, trembling with quiet fury. Is greater than, you think I don't see how you look at me? You think I don't know when you're lying? Then his hand found my wrist again. This time harder. Enough to make me flinch. I remember the clatter of the fork hitting the floor, the smell of burnt sauce, the sound of my heart in my ears. For the first time, I didn't cry. I just looked at him. Really looked. And realized the man standing in front of me wasn't someone I could save. He let go. And for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he whispered, is greater than, if you walk out that door, don't come back. I didn't answer. I just walked into the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the floor until dawn. By morning, I had a plan. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was leaving. Because sometimes survival isn't dramatic. It's just the quiet decision to never let someone decide who you are again. That morning, I moved like a ghost in my own house. He was still asleep, one arm flung across my side of the bed like ownership, the same hand that had gripped my wrist the night before. I watched the rise and fall of his chest and thought, this is the last morning he'll ever wake up beside me. I didn't pack a suitcase. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I started small, quiet. A few bills tucked into a book he never touched, my passport hidden in the lining of an old purse, a spare phone I bought with cash and kept in the laundry basket beneath folded sheets. Leaving isn't easy when the person watching you knows your patterns better than you do. He timed my errands, tracked my calls, even memorized the sounds my keys made when I left the house. So I began changing those patterns. Small shifts he wouldn't notice. I'd take longer at the grocery store, make small detours on my way home, leave one or two lights off to see if he'd comment. He didn't. And that silence told me something important. He'd grown too confident. He thought I was broken enough not to run. Each night, I'd lie awake rehearsing the same moment. Me walking out the door, me breathing free air again. But fear is clever. It whispers that you'll never make it, that the world outside will be worse than the cage you know. It wasn't until I overheard him on the phone one night that I stopped listening to fear. He was in the living room, pacing. Voice low but sharp. Is greater than, she's starting to pull away again, he said. If she tries to leave, I'll make sure she regrets it. Those words were a gift. Because sometimes, it takes hearing your own doom spoken aloud to finally choose survival. The next morning, I slipped out early, told him I had an errand before work. He barely looked up from his phone. That small moment of indifference gave me everything I needed. I opened a new bank account under my maiden name. I called my sister someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a year. She didn't ask questions. She just said, when you're ready, I'll come get you. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks. Not because I felt safe, but because I finally had a plan that could save me. If you've ever had to quietly plan your freedom, if you've ever smiled while secretly building your escape, leave a in the comments. You never know who might need your courage tonight. But the thing about plans is, they don't survive control. Because the moment he realized I was slipping away, he did something I never saw coming. 2 weeks before the date I planned to leave, my luck cracked. He came home early. I didn't hear the car. Didn't hear the door. Just his voice, low, steady, right behind me. Is greater than, what are you doing? My heart stopped. The open envelope on the counter still had the receipt from the new account I'd opened. I tried to cover it with a towel, but his eyes were already there. Is greater than you hiding something? I forced a laugh. Is greater than, just sorting bills. He took a step closer. Is greater than bills? You never handle the bills. His voice was calm, but the calm was a lie. He picked up the receipt, glanced at it, then back at me. The silence stretched, heavy as thunder. Is greater than a new account? In your name? I could feel my throat close. Every lie I'd practiced vanished from my mind. Is greater than I just needed to save for my sister's surgery, I said. You know how hospitals... He cut me off. Is greater than, you think I'm stupid? Then the receipt tore in half. Then in half again. The pieces fluttered to the floor like snow. That's when I realized he wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. His silence did it for him. He leaned close enough that I could smell the whiskey on his breath. Is greater than, if you ever try to leave me again, he whispered. You won't have anywhere to go. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, and I stayed frozen, staring at the torn paper on the tile. It wasn't the threat that scared me. It was how calm he'd sounded when he said it. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I packed one change of clothes in a grocery bag, hid it under the porch, and called my sister from the backup phone. Is greater than tomorrow, I whispered. Come tomorrow. She didn't ask why. She just said, I'll be there at noon. But by morning, he already knew. Because control doesn't sleep. It listens, and it waits. That morning, the sky looked like it was holding its breath. Thick gray clouds pressing down on the house. The kind of stillness that feels like warning. He was supposed to be at work. That was the plan. He always left by 8. But by 8:15, his keys were still on the table. By 8:30, the sound of his footsteps upstairs. Every second he stayed, my heart pounded louder. My sister was already on the road, 40 minutes away and counting. I moved quietly through the house, checking the clock every few minutes, trying to breathe normally so he wouldn't hear how scared I was. He called down from the hallway. Is greater than, you're leaving early today? Is greater than just groceries, I said. My voice cracked on the last word. Is greater than, then I'll come with you, he replied. My stomach turned to ice. I knew if he came, I'd never make it to that car waiting for me outside. So I tried something desperate. Is greater than, actually, I said, forcing a laugh. Why don't you stay and rest? You were up late. He didn't answer. Just silence, and the sound of slow footsteps moving closer. Then he appeared at the bottom of the stairs, watching me with that look I'd learned to fear, half suspicion, half ownership. Is greater than, why do you look nervous? He asked. What's in that bag? My grocery bag. The one with a spare outfit and the money I'd saved. Is greater than, just some clothes for donation, I said quickly. He reached for it. I took a step back. Is greater than, I'll take it, he said. No need for you to go anywhere today. The world went quiet. I could hear my pulse in my ears. Behind him, on the counter, was my phone. If I could get to it just for a second, my sister could hear everything. I moved toward it. He noticed. He grabbed my arm again, but this time, I didn't freeze. I twisted away, snatched the phone, and ran. He shouted my name, the kind of shout that shakes something inside you even after you've escaped it. I slammed the door behind me, barefoot, rain soaking through the porch steps as I sprinted to the street. My sister's car turned the corner just as he reached the doorway. She opened the passenger door, and I threw myself inside, yelling, Go! The tires screeched. He was still shouting when the car sped off, his voice swallowed by the rain. I didn't look back. Because if I did, I might not have had the courage to keep going. But I learned something that day. Leaving isn't the end of control. It's only the beginning of taking your life back. The car ride felt endless. My sister didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer answers. The sound of the rain against the windshield was the only thing that kept me from unraveling. When we finally reached her house, I couldn't move. I sat in the passenger seat gripping my bag like it was the last piece of my life that belonged to me. She turned off the engine. Is greater than, you're safe now, she whispered. Safe. It was such a small word, but it felt foreign, like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. Inside, she gave me clean clothes and tea I never drank. I stared out the window, half expecting his car to appear at any moment. Every sound outside, every passing truck, every slammed door made my heart race. Freedom, it turns out, doesn't come quietly. It comes with panic attacks, nightmares, and guilt. I kept hearing his voice in my head. The way he said, if you walk out that door, don't come back. It wasn't a threat anymore. It was a ghost that followed me everywhere. That first night, I slept on my sister's couch. I woke up every hour to check the locks. Every shadow looked like him. Every creak in the floor made my stomach twist. I'd left the cage, but the fear had followed me out like smoke. Around 3 a.m., I went outside to breathe. The rain had stopped, and the street was quiet. No headlights, no footsteps, just the hum of a world that didn't know my story. For the first time in years, I realized I could look at the sky without asking permission. The moon was pale and distant, but it was there, and for a moment, that was enough. I closed my eyes and whispered, is greater than, you don't own me anymore. The words didn't sound strong, but they were true. And though I didn't know it yet, the next morning would test that truth. Because even when you escape a controlling man, he'll always try once more to remind you who he thinks you belong to. By the next morning, I almost believed the nightmare was over. The sun came through the curtains. My sister humming in the kitchen. The smell of coffee, ordinary things I hadn't felt in months. It almost felt normal. Then my sister's phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. 3 words on the screen. Is greater than, tell her to answer. My chest tightened. Only one person could make a message feel that heavy. I picked up the phone. Another text came through. Is greater than, you think you can just disappear? My hand started shaking. The world I'd rebuilt overnight cracked instantly. He had found me. My sister reached for the phone. Is greater than block him, she said firmly. He's just trying to scare you. But fear doesn't need to knock when it's already in your blood. Blocking him wouldn't erase the sound of his voice that lived in my head. A few minutes later, my own phone, the backup one, lit up across the table. Voicemail. Just 6 seconds long. His voice. Is greater than. You can run, but you'll never be free. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't rage. It was calm. The same quiet tone he used when he made promises he never intended to keep. My sister called the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do. Unless he's physically here or makes a direct threat, it's harassment, not danger. Harassment? Not danger. The difference between the two is just one unanswered phone call. That afternoon, I turned my phone off. The silence felt like safety for a while, until I realized that silence is exactly where fear likes to grow. I went upstairs and stood by the mirror. I didn't look broken anymore. I looked like someone caught between two versions of herself, the one who ran, and the one who had to keep running. And somewhere between those two versions, I decided I wasn't going to hide anymore. Because if he wanted to find me, then he was finally going to see who I'd become. It happened 3 days later. I was standing in my sister's front yard watering the small garden she planted years ago, trying to remind myself what ordinary felt like, when I saw it. His car. That same black sedan, idling halfway down the street, engine running, windows tinted. At first, I told myself it wasn't him. The world is full of black cars. But when the driver's door opened and he stepped out, the world seemed to tilt. He didn't shout. He didn't run toward me. He just stood there, watching. Like he was waiting for me to flinch first. My sister saw him through the window. She came outside, phone already in her hand. Is greater than, leave, she said loudly. I'm calling the police. He smiled that quiet, deliberate smile I'd seen too many times. Is greater than, you can call whoever you want. I just want to talk. Is greater than, you lost that right, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. He took a step closer. Is greater than, you think you can erase me? You think you can start over without me? For the first time, I didn't step back. Is greater than, I don't think, I said softly. I already did. The police arrived faster than I expected. A neighbor must have called too. They spoke to him for a few minutes before leading him back to the car. I stood there, heart pounding, watching as he drove away for the last time. You'd think I'd feel relief, but what I felt instead was nothing. Just quiet, like someone had turned the volume down on a life that had been too loud for too long. That night, my sister asked if I was okay. I didn't know how to answer. How do you describe the feeling of finally being free from someone who once made you feel like freedom didn't exist? I sat by the window again, looking out at the same moon I'd seen from his house so many nights before. But this time, the sky looked wider, lighter, and as strange as it sounds, I realized that his control had taught me something he never meant to, that even the smallest act of standing your ground can make the world open up again. The weeks after the confrontation felt unreal. Every morning I woke up expecting to hear his voice, to see his shoes by the door, to feel the quiet pressure of being watched. But instead, there was nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing, the ticking clock, and silence that finally belonged to me. I started therapy. At first, I didn't even know what to say. How do you explain loving someone who made you afraid of your own reflection? But my therapist smiled gently and said, is greater than, you don't need to explain yet. You just need to exist. So I did. One day at a time. One breath at a time. I began taking walks again alone, without checking my phone. At first, I kept looking over my shoulder. Old habits die hard. But after a while, I realized the sky wasn't following me, and freedom doesn't ask where you've been. My sister would come home from work and find me rearranging her living room, planting flowers, repainting the porch, anything that made me feel like I was creating instead of hiding. And slowly, I began to remember who I was before him. The girl who laughed too loud, who loved thunderstorms, who danced barefoot in the kitchen. I found her again, buried under all that fear, and she was still breathing. I started writing about everything that happened. Not for revenge, not for pity, but because stories are how you take the power back from pain. And when I shared my first piece online, messages started coming in, from women who said they saw themselves in every word. That's when I realized something. Maybe surviving wasn't just about me anymore. Maybe it was about helping someone else survive too. Because every time you tell your story out loud, the thing that once broke you loses its voice. A few months later, I stood on a small stage at a community center, hands trembling, voice shaking, telling my story out loud for the first time. It wasn't a big crowd, maybe 20 people, a few faces hiding behind tears, some nodding quietly like they already knew the ending. But I wasn't there for applause. I was there to reclaim my voice. I spoke about the small beginnings, the harmless rules, the slow isolation, the way control hides behind love until it doesn't. And when I said, is greater than, the moment you start apologizing for breathing, that's when love has already left. The whole room went silent. Afterwards, A woman came up to me. She couldn't have been more than 23. She said, "Is greater than I thought it was just me? I thought I was the crazy one." And I told her, "That's exactly what they want you to think." That night, when I got home, I opened my laptop and began writing everything I'd never said. Every fear, every scar, every lesson. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted meaning. My story wasn't about pain anymore. It was about permission. The permission to walk away, to heal, to start over, to be someone new without feeling guilty for it. I created an online group called Unbroken Voices. At first, it was just a few women sharing their stories anonymously. Within weeks, there were hundreds. Different countries, different lives, but the same silence that needed breaking. Reading their messages every night reminded me that freedom isn't a destination. It's a choice you keep making, especially on the days it's hardest to believe you deserve it. If this story reached you tonight, if it reminded you that walking away isn't weakness, it's courage disguised as survival, drop A in the comments. Your voice might be the one that gives someone else the strength to leave. And as I sat there reading all those messages from strangers, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't a victim of his control anymore. I was the proof that it ended with me. It's been almost a year since I walked out that door. Some mornings I still wake up expecting the weight of his arm beside me, the silence of control pressing down like a shadow. But then I remember that silence isn't his anymore. It's mine. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. The first night I slept without checking the locks. The first time I laughed without guilt. The first morning I looked in the mirror and recognized the woman staring back. I used to think freedom meant escape. But freedom isn't just running away. It's learning how to stop running from yourself. Sometimes, when I walk past a mirror, I catch a glimpse of her, the woman I used to be. Small, careful, quiet. And I smile. Because she survived. And the woman I am now owes her everything. I've learned that control doesn't end when you leave someone. It ends the moment you stop believing you were ever powerless. So if you're listening to this and you feel trapped, in fear, in silence, in someone else's idea of who you should be, I need you to hear me. You are not weak. You are not crazy. And you are not alone. The world is bigger than the room they tried to keep you in. And the day you decide to walk out, the sky will open up for you too. Because sometimes, the people who try to control you aren't meant to ruin your life. They're meant to remind you that it's yours to begin with. If this story spoke to your heart tonight, tell me in the comments. Is greater than? What does freedom mean to you now? Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read at 2 a.m. Thank you for watching Unlimited Mind Stories. Subscribe for more stories that remind us. Even after control, silence, or heartbreak, you can always rebuild.